All right. So my group was Michael, Jack, Ari, and myself, and we're going to be discussing Afghanistan. A brief presentation overview. Um, the geographical features, climate, and landscapes are going to be covered by me. Invasions throughout time and the geographical connection to these invasions will be covered by me as well. Michael's going to discuss culture and linguistics. Ari's going to discuss access to water and how it's affected development throughout time. And Jack's going to discuss the years following the U.S. invasion and what the modern geography looks like, as well as a brief discussion on the Trade Development Index and lithium. So, Afghanistan is considered a multi ethnic country, and it's located in South Central Asia, expanding over 251,826 square miles. Afghanistan's geography consists of small but fertile river valleys, irrigated land, deep gorges, deserts, high plateaus, and snow covered mountains. The eastern side of the country is divided by the Hindu Kush and Pir Mountains, shown on the left. These mountains have an elevation of 24,000 feet above sea level at their highest peak, called Vakan. The climate here changes drastically depending on where one resides within Afghanistan. For example, during the summer in the capital Kabul at 5,800 feet above sea level, shown in the picture in the middle, it can be 50 degrees Fahrenheit at sunrise and 100 degrees by noon. Excuse me. During the same time of the year, 90 miles away at the Jalabad Plains at an altitude of 1,800 feet, midday temperatures can reach 115 on average, and there are over 300 cloudless, sunny days a year. Droughts have been plaguing the country and seriously impacting agricultural production. It traditionally does not rain from May to November, making the country very dry and dusty. There is limited amounts of fresh water, which Ari will go into further detail later. And there's only 7,696 square miles of land that is irrigated and usable for farming. This means that only 11.9% of the land is arable, meaning that it is land that can be plowed and tilled and planted and used for agriculture or cash crops. 0.2% of the land is occupied by permanent plants. This means plants that produce for multiple seasons. And this leaves 87.9% of land in Afghanistan that can't be used for any form of agriculture. Due to the geography and the limited amount of usable land for agriculture, this has led to serious problems regarding food production. It's worth noting that nearly 19 million Afghanis, or 45% of the population, are experiencing high levels of food insecurity, according to the Integrated Food Security Phase classification. Much more simpler. It's the IPC report. IPC is a 5-level ranking system. 1 being minimal and 5 being famine. In the case of Afghanistan, you can see on the food insecurity map here that nearly half of the population is experiencing level 3 crisis or level 4 emergency food insecurity. And this is a direct result of the geographical factors and poor governmental practices regarding food distribution. However, the other 87.9% of the land is rich in natural resources. It's estimated that Afghanistan possesses wealth of non-fuel minerals that's up to $1 trillion US. Afghanistan receives the majority of its endowments from the extraction of iron, copper, lithium, cobalt, mercury, uranium, and chromium. So I'm going to move on to talking about Afghanistan's history with conflict. Since the country is landlocked between Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, China, Pakistan, and Iran, it's been a major trade route throughout history. The country has been sought after by many empires, but the country's mountainous landscapes, coupled with dry, hot deserts, has repeatedly caused invaders to fail. Furthermore, many villages are built like fortresses, and and due to the constant invasions throughout time. These buildings, shown in the pictures below, litter the country, and are fire resistant mud brick compounds. These types of buildings are known as qualts, which is the Muslim word for defense fortress, and just something like these buildings and show Afghanistan's history with conflict. I'm going to move on and go through a brief history on all the invasions throughout time, starting with Darius the First of Persia, who conquered Afghanistan in 550 BC as part of the Achaemenid Empire. Little is known about this time, but it's worth noting. In 330 BC, Alexander the Great invaded Afghanistan against the Persian Empire. The Greeks settled in the Indus River basin, and the Khyber Pass holds significant geographical relevance because Alexander the Great used this pass to get his troops into India and began his conquest through India. During the 7th and 9th centuries, the area of Afghanistan was invaded from the west by the second caliph, or Rashidun. These caliphs were collectively known as the Sunni sect of Islam. This Islamic conquest led to most of the inhabitants of Afghanistan being converted to Islam. In 1219 through 1221, Genghis Khan invaded the area, and his grandson, Hula Khan, held the area and resided in the area which is now known as the Jahatu district. From 1383 to 1385, the Timurid dynasty took over Afghanistan. The Timurid Empire came from the Mongol tribe known as the Barlas and invaded from the north, neighboring Transylvania, which is basically modern-day Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. These people were Muslims, but from the Sunni sect, and this invasion forever changed Afghanistan, leaving 17 million people dead and tons of women were enslaved. The leader Timur and his armies were allied with the Uzbeks, Hazaras, and Turkic communities, who then moved into the country and are developed communities and are still there till this day. In 1837, the consolidation of the Sikh Empire in Punjab and Manjarar took on Afghanistan during the time which was known as the Battle of the Prussia War in 1834. During the 19th and 20th centuries, Afghanistan was invaded 3 times by the British. The first 2 conflicts were known as the First and Second Anglo-Afghan Wars. The first took place from 1838 to 1842, a second from 1878 to 1880, and the third only lasted 3 months and resulted in the Durand Line, which I'll discuss later, but this is the line between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The Russian-Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan in 1929 and in 1930, and at one point they had 100,000 personnel there attempting to enforce Soviet-style reform. This was not well received by the community, and this led to Islamic Mujahideen groups popping up. And these Mujahideen groups opposed the Soviets and ended up fighting. And these Mujahideen groups led to the rise of warlords and eventually the emergence of the Taliban. The Mujahideen groups were successful in running the Soviets out of the country. And then on October 7th, the U.S. military and NATO countries began another invasion on Afghanistan, titled Operation Enduring Freedom, which I'm sure you may have heard of. The point of this was to capture Osama bin Laden, and this ended up leading to the toppling of the Taliban government. And it's worth noting that during this time, the Taliban were eradicated and fled to the southeast portion of the country, But recently, after we left, the Taliban have come back and seized power. In closing, I want to. It's important to recognize how it's nearly impossible for a central government or a foreign power to impose and enforce any kind of rule. Um, and this has been a pattern throughout history, and that's why the country is set up how it is today. Um, the arbitrary borders allow numerous groups to cross between neighboring countries, and that's why I said I wanted to touch on the Duradan line, which is the border between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and the it's arbitrary to the people of Afghanistan. So if you were an invading force, the people of Afghanistan, you would fight them, and then they would run into Pakistan, regroup and resupply, and then come back with more men and more supplies back across that border, making it really difficult to get a good grip on power when these groups are able to slip across borders and come back. Um, so thank you for your guys' time, and Michael is going to be moving on and talking about culture and linguistics.